Welcome to part 2 of Justin Baldoni's October 7, 2025 deposition. Gottlieb. Mr. Baldoni, you spoke in publicly about a pornography addiction. Is that right? I have. You were exposed to pornography for the first time at age 10. Is that right? You must have read my book. I have read some things. You've talked about how that addiction affected your relationship with women. I believe I have. And in some ways, and you'll use your words and not mine, it infected or polluted your relationship to women. Is that right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I think I've written when I have spoken about it publicly. It's been in relation to the part of the brain that's fired when one views pornographic images or graphic images in general. Gottlieb. Okay, I'm most interested in what you said publicly about how, in your view, being exposed to pornography repetitively affects one's view of consent. Do you recall giving a talk called Boys Will Be Human, a talk on healthy masculinity with Justin Baldoni? I wrote a book called Boys Will Be Human, and I imagine I've done a talk or two. Yeah. Some interviews about the subject of the book. Is this a speech I gave, or is this an interview that I gave? This is during an interview. And I want to read you what you said. You said, as read, when you hit 11 or 12 years old and your friends have a phone, and maybe you don't, and you're being shown things for the first time, and then you start to think that is what women want. And in porn, as we know, no means yes or try harder. It starts to become very confusing, which is definitely something that happened to me. Do you recall ever saying anything like that? I'm sure I did, yes. Is that what happened to you? Shapiro, objection. Justin, when I was sexually assaulted, yes. Gottlieb, okay. You said after that, as read, I'm sure I have crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming. Do you recall saying that? I'm sure I did say it, yes. Was that true? Again, I don't know. I said I'm sure I had, but I have never never not had consent with a woman. It was said in most of my book, and most of my speaking is speaking to men so that men don't have to feel ashamed of whatever it is they're experiencing. So in certain situations, I'm not saying that I've crossed boundaries or not gotten consent, but what I'm essentially saying is there's even a possibility that in my teens and 20s, I wasn't aware. Well, literally what you said is, as read, I'm sure I have crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming. So that's what you said. And my question to you is, do I understand your testimony to be that you were essentially making that up in order to make other men feel that you were relatable to them? Shapiro, objection. Justin, no. I'm sure I had crossed boundaries in my teens and 20s. I'm sure I have. Gottlieb, and do you think that was because of the exposure that you had to this kind of toxic pornography? I'm sure that was a part of it. It was also a different time, and part of why I wrote the book was that consent wasn't taught to boys. And I wanted to make sure that we taught consent to boys and men. If I told you, Mr. Baldoni, that quote I just read to you was from a discussion that you had with No More, does that refresh your recollection at all in 2023? I'm sure it was. Okay, would it surprise you to learn that in a discussion with No More, no, you said that you were sure that you had crossed boundaries and lines in your teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming? No, it doesn't surprise me. Did you ever consider whether people listening to that conversation with you and No More might be upset or triggered by that statement you made? Shapiro, objection. Justin, no, as this is a conversation that is about healing. And these are conversations that I've had with women at No More. And I think anybody that works in this space can agree that pornography, when given to young people, messes with their brains. And we need all hands on deck. So I have no problem being open about what was a pornography addiction in my, early teens and 20s. Gottlieb, when did you free yourself of the addiction to pornography? Shapiro, objection. Justin, so I don't have a clinical addiction to pornography. I will start there. So clinically speaking, I technically have always been free of addiction. Gottlieb, you're not a doctor to pornography. Shapiro, objection to. Justin, I'm not a doctor, but what I'm saying is I've never been diagnosed with a pornography addiction. It was something that I talked about because I felt I was consuming porn when I was emotional or in my teens, when I felt lonely, mixed with like hormones changing and, all of various things. And I also wasn't exposed like a lot of boys and men are today because I was born with dial-up modems. Gottlieb, same. Justin, so I imagine we were timing our bathroom visits at the same time, so I'm assuming we're similar in age. So I've probably been free of it since I felt like I had one. I'd say early 30s. Okay, but it's fair to say that you have spoken openly and publicly, very openly, about having an addiction to pornography for some period of time earlier in your life, correct? Yes, I was just clarifying because addiction is, sure, you're not a doctor. Shapiro, I'm sorry, I just want to ask both of you to wait until the other one finishes. Gottlieb, my apologies. I will try harder. Justin, likewise. Gottlieb, you attended Miss Lively's deposition, correct? I did. Do you remember at her deposition when your counsel, Mr. Friedman, asked my client, Miss Lively, would it surprise you that Justin never had an addiction to pornography? I don't remember that. Do you have any idea why? Shapiro, objection. Justin, why what? Gottlieb, why would someone who knows anything about you say that? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Gottlieb, do you believe that you don't believe that having an addiction to pornography absolves men of whatever they do as a result of that addiction, do you? Shapiro, objection. Justin, far from it. Gottlieb, and you believe men who cross boundaries with women should be held accountable for that, right? I think crossing boundaries is a very general, broad statement, but if based on whatever the boundary that was crossed, I think there should be an appropriate reconciliation, conversation, atonement. If one partner, regardless of gender, to a relationship, romantic, sexual, or otherwise, sets a boundary, yes. Do you believe that boundary is negotiable? No. Shapiro, objection. Gottlieb, okay, so once the boundary is set, somebody crosses it, you believe that the person who crosses the boundary ought to be accountable. Shapiro, objection. Justin, yes. Gottlieb, okay, do you recall ever talking about a meeting or a moment that you had with Britney Spears? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I think I do. Gottlieb, do you recall meeting Britney Spears on the scene of Jane the Virgin? I do. Do you recall talking about that and telling a story about how I went up and gave her a hug, or I gave her a hey? I was like, hey, I gave her a big hug, and I think I scared her because she was like, hi. And then I just kind of had this awkward moment of like, did I just harass Britney Spears? Do you recall saying that? I don't recall saying that, but I believe I'm sure that I said it. Is that consistent with your recollection of how you remember that occurring? What I just said? I don't remember giving her a hug, but I remember it. I don't remember giving her a hug, but I remember it. I think I was too excited to meet her, yes, but I don't remember the details of it. But I can't imagine that I was not telling the truth and sharing a story about it. Okay, have you ever been? She was very nice. Sorry, she was very nice. Okay, I'm pleased to hear that. Have you ever been the subject of a workplace investigation? Like they were investigating me? Investigating any aspect of your conduct at work? Not that I can think of. Prior to the events of this case, are you aware of whether anyone has ever accused you of harassment? To my knowledge, I have never been accused of harassment. Prior to the events of this case, are you aware of any time where you were accused of inappropriate behavior at work? No. Have you ever been disciplined in your time at Wayfarer Studios for any conduct or conduct at work? No. Other than what has occurred in this case, has anyone to your knowledge ever refused to work with you on account of your behavior? Not to my knowledge. Wayfarer produced the film Empire Waste, is that correct? Yes. And who was the writer and director of Empire Waste? Claire Ayoub. Were you involved in the production of Empire Waste? In a similar way that I'm involved in other productions? Yes. Sorry? Yes. What is that way? I helped with the creative. I helped cast it. I helped Claire get the main song for the film and the editing process. Introducing her to a friend of mine, I gave notes on the edit. I approved casting. I helped her find the lead actress by having the idea to make a TikTok looking for a very specific person. And because of that work, we discovered somebody that was phenomenal. And I just tried to support. I visited set and gave notes when I was there that she found very helpful, I think. And it sounds like you did a lot, not in comparison to what a on the ground producer does, but it's just part of what I do. But you do recall visiting the set? Yes. Okay, did Miss Ayoub accuse you of misconduct? No. Ever? No. You never heard from anyone that Miss Ayoub had problems with your behavior on the set or during the production of Empire Waste? I never heard from anyone that Miss Ayoub had problems with my behavior. Even as you sit here today, have you still not heard anything? And again, I don't want to, nothing that you might have learned from your lawyers. So other than conversations you may have had with your lawyers, have you ever heard from Mr. Heath or anyone else at Wayfarer Studios that Miss Ayoub had problems with your behavior during the production of Empire Waste? Again, I'm just trying to be specific to your question. I've never heard that Miss Ayoub had problems with my behavior. However, I am aware that Miss Ayoub has signed a declaration that evidently said that I was abusive to her or something like that. Have you read that declaration? I have. And that's a declaration that Miss Ayoub filed in this case, right? Surprisingly, yes. In the second paragraph of that declaration, Miss Ayoub writes, as read, I wrote and directed a film called Empire Waste, which was produced by Wayfarer Studios, LLC. Justin Baldoni, a founder of Wayfarer, was producer. As part of my work on Empire Waste, I had repeated negative interactions with Mr. Baldoni and his associates, including verbal abuse by Mr. Baldoni. I asked Wayfarer that Mr. Baldoni not be permitted on set during the majority of production as a result of those experiences. Do you recall reading that? I recall reading that. Did you verbally abuse Miss Ayoub at any time? God, no. So it is your testimony that Miss Ayoub is lying in what she's written here. It's my testimony that I did not verbally abuse her. I don't want to call her a liar. Have you ever talked to her about whether she feels that you verbally abused her? I spoke to her many times, especially after what could be considered an incident, and we had a lovely relationship, which is why I was invited to set, and I was very surprised. Did anyone ever tell you that Ms. Ayoub had asked to have you removed from her set? No. Even as you sit here today, no one's ever told you that. No. I was never asked to be removed from her set. On the contrary, I was invited. Did you also read in Ms. Ayoub's declaration that, as read, Empire Waste was set to be released in the fall of 2024 in August of that year? As a result of my experiences with Mr. Baldoni and ongoing press coverage relating to Mr. Baldoni, and it ends with us, I requested that he not be involved in Empire Waste marketing or public relations effort. Wayfarer agreed to my request. Do you remember reading that? I did. Do you believe that statement is truthful or false? I was not aware that she did not want me to help promote the movie. Okay. Gottlieb, this is Exhibit 21. Stenographic reporter. Exhibit 21 for the record. Exhibit 21 marked for identification. Gottlieb, Mr. Baldoni, you've been handed a document marked as Exhibit 21, which is a document bearing the Bates number Heath 31887 through 31889. Gottlieb, who is Ashmi Dang, by the way? Ashmi is the head of marketing for Wayfarer Studios. Okay, and who is Andrew Kaloff? Kaloff is our head of production and development. Okay, and this is a text message involving Miss Dang, Mr. Kaloff, Mr. Heath, Miss Angela Carden. Who is Angela Carden? Angela is executive under Andrew Kaloff. Okay, and Tara Hanks, who is that? Tara Hanks is the president of Wayfarer Studios. Okay, so this is a text exchange involving those people on September 27, 2024. And do you see at the top of this, at page 3187, the first page of the exhibit, do you see there's a screenshot of a text here? I do. Do you see Ms. Dang shares a screenshot of what she says is Claire's message with a group? Do you mind if I read the whole document? I don't. Okay. Do you see how Ms. Dang had screenshot Claire's message at the top of this text exchange? Yes. And do you see how Claire's message says, as read, genuinely feeling effing sick. That man was banned from my set. I see that. And do you see how everyone in this text chain understands that that man is referring to you? Yes. Did any of the individuals on this text thread ever inform you that Miss Ayoub believed she had banned you from her set? I'm not sure how she could have believed that. So to answer your question, no. Okay, on the next page at the top, do you see Miss Dang writes at 1:46 p.m. as read, I'll add during the early days of working with her on the marketing, she called to express how upsetting the experience was for her, and she had language added to her agreement as a result. Do you see that? I do. Do you know what Ms. Dang is referring to with the language added to her agreement? This is the first I'm seeing of it. Did anyone ever talk to you about changes that were made to Claire Ayoub's agreement based upon how upsetting the experience had been for her? No. Do you see a bit lower down in the text at 5:23 p.m. Ms. Dang says, as read, to close the loop, JB took down and reposted the trailer with updated copy. Yes. JB is you? Yes. Do you, I presume, do you recall reposting or posting at any time the trailer for Empire Waste? Yes. Do you recall doing that around this time at the end of September 2024? I would imagine that was the time, yes. You earlier said something about what you could be considered an incident that had occurred that you discussed with Miss Ayoub. Yes. What was that incident? Claire and I had a lovely relationship. She was a first-time filmmaker, and I very much believed in the film that she was trying to make. Also, I was made aware that she was very inexperienced, so I had offered to mentor her and help her any way that I could. So we went back and forth. We had a few calls, I believe, and I was building a relationship with her from that point. And at the same time, Claire was working with her producing partner to get the budget in line for the movie. We had greenlit her movie at $2 million. It was a movie that nobody else wanted. It was a movie that I believed in the message of very strongly, and I wanted to support her. And we had a partner at that time, which was Procter and Gamble. And it was my understanding that the budget had inflated from $2 million to $3 million, then to $4 million, then to $5 million. After multiple conversations with my executive team, she was unable to get the budget down. On a phone call with Procter and Gamble, I imagine there were 8 or 9, maybe 10 people on the call and ourselves. We were going through where we are with the budget. Procter & Gamble was not putting much in. We were the majority financiers. And I was very clear with her that we would not be making her movie if she couldn't get her budget down. That was the extent of the conversation. There was no voice raised. It was me simply acting as the chairman at that time. There was no president, or I don't believe there was a CEO. And I just said, we won't be making your movie unless you get the budget down. And my understanding was that she was very unhappy with that, and that she felt what was relayed to me that I threw her under the bus, which is also very typical. I mean, directors are unhappy with studios all the time when people won't make their movies for the price. But that was it. And then I think maybe a month went by and I sent her a voice note before day one of filming. I'm sure by now you're familiar with my voice notes. Tell me more. Well, there was a voice note around the world I sent to Miss Lively that everyone has heard, I guess. And I sent her a lovely voice note saying how much I believed in her and the mission, and she responded, and we had a lovely text exchange, and we texted throughout most of production, to which point I then came to visit. When was the conversation that you had with Miss Ayoub that you are recounting here? Before pre-production even began. I don't even know. Before pre-production? Yeah, this was in the deal. It was not on the, sorry, this was in the deal-making phase before there was even a contract, before we had agreed to even make the movie. Okay, before there was a set. There was no set, yes. It was on the phone? Over Zoom. Nobody else wanted Miss Ayoub's movie? No. You saved it? No. Like very often, people come to us when the other studios or companies don't believe in the films, and if we believe that it speaks to the mission of why we are here, we will take the risk. You said everyone around the world has heard my voice note to Miss Lively. I was making a joke, but yeah. That's because you released it, right? Yeah. Actually, I did not release that, but you instructed someone to release it on your behalf. Actually, I did not. You knew it was going to be released on your behalf. That's privileged. Did there ever come a time during August of 2024 when you learned that there was a woman on TikTok alleging that you invited her up to your hotel room years ago in some incident that occurred alongside that? I think I learned about that in Miss Lively's complaint. No one had told you about that in August of 2024? I have no memory of that. You have no memory of discussing with anyone at Wayfarer, anyone at Tag, or with Miss Abel a social media post alleging that you had invited some girl up to a hotel room years ago? Shapiro, objection. Justin, like I said, I believe I heard about it for the first time reading her CRD complaint. Gottlieb, okay. But if you have anything that can refresh my memory, I'm happy to look at it. But I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Have you reviewed that post since the filing of Miss Lively's lawsuit? I've never seen it. Do you have any idea what this woman alleged? From what I've been made aware of since then, that I invited her to a hotel room. Okay, do you know whether that occurred or not? I've never invited a woman to a hotel room that wasn't my wife. Have you ever invited a woman to a hotel room before you were married? No. Never? You're sure? I wish I was that confident before I was married. So the answer to my question is, you are sure that prior to your marriage and after your marriage, you have never invited a woman in any circumstance, in any capacity, up to a hotel room that you were staying in? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I'm sure that before I was married or while being married, I have never invited a woman up to a hotel room that I was staying in. Gottlieb, okay, who's Shane Norman? Presumably not the woman that you're talking about right now. Who is Shane Norman? Shane Norman is a former employee of Wayfarer Entertainment. And Wayfarer Entertainment was a predecessor company to Wayfarer Studios? Correct. And what was your role with respect to Wayfarer Entertainment? Founder, co-founder. What was Shane Norman's role with Wayfarer Entertainment? Shane Norman was brought on by our CEO at the time to assist with the building and the creation of, at that time, which was the beginning of Man Enough. The podcast? There was no podcast. It was to help in the launch of the book, Man Enough, and to figure out ways that we could do activations and get more men involved. Did you know that Mr. Norman was being hired before he was hired? I knew, yes. I was introduced to Mr. Norman, and we had a job interview together. Yes. Okay, you interviewed Mr. Norman? I did. Well, the last interview, because he would be working with me directly. Okay, and a number of people interviewed Mr. Norman. You were the final interview? Correct. And you approved hiring him? I did. You thought he would be good at the job for which you were hiring him? He presented fantastically. Okay, and it didn't work out that way? Shapiro, objection. Justin, it did not. Gottlieb, Mr. Norman was extremely abusive to women? I think you're referring to Mr. Sorowitz's testimony? I am. I don't know if I would characterize it that way. We discovered that he was very combative, and we had been made aware after some time, which we were frustrated we didn't know earlier, that he had made several women cry and he was not listening to their ideas. Let me read you what Mr. Sarowitz said and ask you if it's true. Okay. What Mr. Sarowitz, I had to learn how to pronounce his name. Mr. Sarowitz said, as read, We had an issue where we had an employee who was extremely abusive to women. It got to the point where each woman that they got in a meeting with was left with tears. Is that a truthful statement about Shane Norman? I don't know if that's a truthful statement. I don't know if every woman that he was in a meeting with was left in tears. Did that statement fairly capture the gist of Mr. Norman's behavior when he was employed by Wayfarer Entertainment? I can't speak to Mr. Sorowitz's intention with those words, but my understanding was that that is maybe an exaggeration, but very well could be Mr. Sorowitz's view on what happened. Would you agree with me that Mr. Sorowitz is a very thoughtful man? Shapiro, objection. Justin, yes. Gottlieb, and you were here during his deposition for at least part of it, right? I was. He considered my questions very carefully before he answered them. You remember that, right? Shapiro, objection, objection. Justin, I do remember that, yes. Gottlieb, and seemed to me he was being truthful and trying to be accurate. Is that your impression also? I'm not saying that he wasn't truthful, but you are saying that he was exaggerating. Shapiro, objection. Justin, I said that in my opinion. Having handled the situation alongside him, I wouldn't have characterized it in that way. Gottlieb, do you know, he said a little bit later that there were many complaints made about Mr. Norman, and when I said many complaints, do you know how many? He answered virtually every woman that they ever worked with. Is that true? It's my understanding that Mr. Sarowitz was not directly involved in any of this outside of when it came to our attention from the CEO. So he's free to express his opinion. But as that person that was there, I don't believe that's a fair understanding of exactly what happened. I think it was far more nuanced than that. Was an investigation performed? I believe so, yeah. Did the investigation corroborate that virtually every woman that Mr. Norman worked with had complained about his behavior? I don't remember the full details, but I imagine it did, yes. Did the investigation provide a basis for removing Mr. Norman from the position he was in? Yes. Did you agree with that? Yes. Did you review whatever the final report or recommendation was that described Mr. Norman's behavior? Yes. Did you find that informative in understanding what had occurred? Yes. And you found it informative in understanding what had occurred even though you had been present for a lot of what occurred. Is that right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, not correct. Gottlieb, you weren't present for any of the incidents that were described in the report of the investigation into Mr. Norman's behavior? I was not. That report was in writing? Correct. Do you know who conducted it or wrote it? An outside group of former attorneys who do HR, I believe. Do you know who that was? I don't recall the name. Multiple women. I think it was 2 or 3 women. Was it important to you that it was women who did that investigation? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I don't remember it being important to me. Well, you brought it up right now. You said it was multiple women, and I didn't ask you their genders. Why did your brain go to that? Shapiro, objection. Justin, if you have a neuroscientist here, we could ask him. I have no idea, but as I recall, I can give you my understanding. I see things in pictures, so I'm very right-brained, I believe. And when I thought of the women who I had just seen in my mind on Zoom, they were in fact women. And so as my brain saw that they were women, I said women. I hope that answers your question. Gottlieb, it does. Did you support Mr. Sorowitz's decision about the employment action to take with respect to Mr. Norman? I did. And you know that the employment action meant that he remained on with Man Enough in a consulting or part-time position for a number of months. Yes. And he continued to be paid. Yes. And you supported that. I did. Who is Liz Plank? Liz Plank is my former co-host of the Man Enough podcast. How long was she your co-host? Maybe 3 years. What changed? What changed? What changed that caused her to not be your co-host anymore? I imagine the New York Times article and the entire world thinking I was a bad man. Did she tell you that? No. Did you talk to her when she quit? No. Did you read anything that she wrote about why she didn't want to be a co-host anymore? I believe it was shown to me, yes. Do you recall what it said? I can't recall exactly what it said, no. Was it not important to you to understand why Miss Plank wanted to discontinue a 3-year-long professional relationship at that point in time? Shapiro, objection. Justin, can you ask the question a different way? Gottlieb, I can try. You said you didn't talk to her after she quit. No. And you didn't reach out to her to talk to her. No. You weren't interested in hearing from her perspective on why she didn't want to be co-host of this podcast that was very important to you anymore? Shapiro, objection. Justin, that's not it at all. Gottlieb, so what is it? Shapiro, objection. Justin, my memory, if it's correct, was that when she resigned from the podcast, she had asked to pass on, that she didn't want anyone to reach out to her. Gottlieb, who did you hear that from? I believe the person who runs the Man Enough podcast. Who is that? Tara. Tara? His name is Tara? Who is that? Tara? Tara? His name is Tara. T, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, first and last name, please. Right, I'm having a hard time thinking of his last name right now. Forgive me. Okay, so it's someone named Tara, former. We don't currently have a Man Enough podcast, but he ran it, yes. And Jamie Heath was also the one who informed me. Okay, so someone named Tara and Mr. Heath informed you that Liz Plank did not want to be contacted. That she didn't want anyone from the show contacting her. Did they tell you why? No. Did you ask? I assumed. What did you assume? I assumed that she didn't want to have a conversation about why she left. Okay. And I tried to respect that. On the set of Ends With Us, at any point, did you have a practice of hugging people to start your day? I think some people might qualify me as a hugger. Is that a yes? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I wouldn't call it a practice. I also have a practice of high-fiving people, so Gottlieb, my question was, on the set of It Ends With Us, at any point in time, did you have a practice of hugging people or giving hugs at the start of the day? I wouldn't call it a practice, but if you ask a different version of that question, I might give you the answer that you want. Your lawyer is going to get really mad at you if you try to do that. Are there any days that you can think of where you began the day by hugging multiple people at the start of the day's work? Shapiro, objection. Justin, sure, yes. Gottlieb, on more than one day? Yes. Was it every day on the production of It Ends With Us? Did I give a hug to more than one person on every day? Every day, at the start of the day. I'm sure I did, or got hugged. I don't know if it was exclusively giving. Did Mr. Heath? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I wasn't with Mr. Heath all the day, every day. Gottlieb, okay. On the very first day of shooting, do you know if you greeted people at the start of the day, May 15th, 2023, with hugs? I don't, but I imagine I did, and was given hugs. I don't, but I imagine I did, and was given hugs, too. Cast members and crew? Shapiro, objection. Justin, is that a question? Gottlieb, did you hug cast members and members of the crew on May 15th, the first day of production? I imagine hugs were exchanged between cast members and crew, including perhaps some people you had not met before? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe. Gottlieb, did you have any conversations before you hugged people on your set about whether they were comfortable with physical touching? Justin, not any more than people had with me when they came to give me a hug. I think there's just an energy, like, no offense, but I wouldn't give you a hug. But I just think there's a human energy that two people may be unconsciously exchange. I don't know if you believe, I'm not saying you have to believe in energy. I'm just saying that I think there's a human greeting when you're starting something that is going to be a journey. That's not going to be easy, where you're creating an environment. And oftentimes, like the way that I move through the world, I think I'm very open, and people will hug me. Present counsel excluded. No hurt feelings, sir. You were the director of this film, right? Yes. And you're a supervisor? Yes. And the policy that we walked through in some length before, one of the things it references in it is hugging. Do you recall that? I do recall that. You also understand, because it's part of how you set up your studio, that there are power dynamics at play in the workplace, right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, yes. Gottlieb, and you also understand, because you've spoken eloquently and admirably about many of these topics about violence and abuse, that there are some people that have deeply held traumas that they have not exposed or fully gone through or talked about, right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, of course. Gottlieb, and that might include somebody that has a trauma that makes them uncomfortable with being touched. Absolutely. Okay, you hugged Miss Lively on multiple occasions on the set, right? Yes. Every day? Objection. No. Gottlieb, how many times would you estimate that I hugged Miss Lively? On the set. So not outside of the set environment, but at work on the set. Shapiro, objection. Justin, are these hugs, I'm so sorry. Gottlieb, sorry, are these hugs that I initiated, or are these hugs that I was a recipient of? You can characterize it however you'd like. I just want to be as accurate in my testimony as possible. Okay. As it relates to the hugging, that was my question. That was the question. Which one? You can include hugs that you believe you initiated and hugs you believe Miss Lively initiated. Shapiro, objection. Justin, like lump them all together? Gottlieb, sure, your best estimate. Okay. Number of times. Shapiro, objection. Justin, maybe a greeting and an exit, so at the most, maybe again. I don't know. That's my answer to you, Mr. Gottlieb. I don't know. Gottlieb, fair enough. And when you don't know, that's what I always want your answer to be. I don't know. Do you know who Vivian Baker is? Vivian Baker is Miss Lively's makeup artist, I believe. Do you know that she testified under oath in this case? Yes. Are you aware that she testified that there was a culture of hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? I am now. Are you aware that she said that that made a number of people uncomfortable? I find that odd. You find that odd? Why? Because Mrs. Baker was often the one that would run up and give me a hug. And because of that, you find it odd that she testified that a number of people felt uncomfortable with the culture of hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? Correct. Do you remember earlier when you testified about the hot tub? You're referring to what? Sexually harassed? When you were sexually harassed in the hot tub? Yes. Do you remember that moment when you thought maybe I should do what this powerful person is suggesting that I ought to do? Shapiro, objection. I don't know if I testified to having a moment where I thought maybe I should do what he's suggesting I do. Gottlieb, do you remember saying that to Glamour? I don't remember saying that to Glamour. Do you remember thinking that for a moment? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I remember seeing his naked genitals inches away from my face before he walked and lowered himself into the hot tub and asked me to take off my pants. Gottlieb, okay. Justin, my shorts, I don't know if I remember feeling, I remember feeling, how do I leave the situation? Gottlieb, do you think Miss Baker was perjuring herself when she said that multiple people felt uncomfortable because of the culture of hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I'm not sure how my assumption of Miss Baker's testimony would lead to perjury. Gottlieb, do you or do you not think that she was being truthful when she said that multiple people felt uncomfortable about a culture of hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I think she was being truthful. That's not why I said I thought it was odd. Gottlieb, okay, did you ever hear from anyone on the set of It Ends With Us that daily hugging, was making them uncomfortable? There was a point in time that I heard that, yes. And when was that? That was from Ange Gianetti and I believe Alex Sachs. Do you recall when that was? It was early on in production, maybe first week or two. Okay, so that's in May of 2023. Shapiro, objection. Justin, I have a feeling you know the date better than me, so yes. Gottlieb, and what did you do when Miss Sachs and Miss Gianetti told you that certain people felt uncomfortable with the hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I stopped hugging. Gottlieb, did you perform an investigation? Because people didn't want there to be as much hugging? That's my question. No. Did you inform anybody in HR? I did not. Even though hugging is one of the items that appears in your sexual harassment policy? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I was unaware of any official complaint of the hugging. In fact, quite the opposite. Gottlieb, again, and we did this before. You understand, because we had this exchange before, that an official complaint does not need to be filed in order for something to violate the Wayfarer Studios sexual harassment policy, right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, correct. Gottlieb, and you understand that there are supervisor responsibilities that apply. Shapiro, objection. Gottlieb, that do not depend upon the filing of an official HR complaint, right? Shapiro, objection. Justin, correct. Gottlieb, okay. But just to point you back to 9054, page 6, paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it says, as read, if any supervisor or manager becomes aware of a violation of this policy, and I stand by the fact that I was not aware of any violation of the policy. Okay, so you would need to, under your understanding of the policy, you would need to determine in your judgment that the policy had been violated before you got HR involved? Shapiro, objection. Justin, I don't believe I was aware of any violation of the policy. If that were the case, then every single person on that set would have been reported to HR who engaged in any sort of hugging, including, ironically, Mrs. Baker, who hugged each time she saw me post the incident where I was made aware of the hugging, which made me feel very awkward. Gottlieb, okay. Is it your testimony that after this conversation with Miss Sachs and Miss Gianetti that there was no more hugging on the set of It Ends With Us that occurred that you were a part of? Shapiro, objection. Justin, my recollection is I was very aware once I was made aware that I believe it was Miss Sachs and Mrs. Slate specifically felt the set was too huggy. Hence my feeling that there was no violation. It was a generalization, and I believe the word used was huggy or comfy, which I think would have been a strange thing to report. I remember very much being extra cautious and aware of the energy between who I were to approach on a daily basis and who I were to hug. I remember shifting to many more high fives than hugs, including solely for Mrs. Slate and Miss Lively. So good morning high five. I don't think there was ever a hug that took place between myself, Mrs. Slate, or Miss Lively after I became aware that the set was too huggy. Gottlieb, in any prior movie you worked on or set you worked on, did the issue of hugging ever come up to your recollection? No. This was the first time that you had ever had this issue raised, addressed, spoken about? This is the first time for many things, Mr. Gottlieb. Did you ever tell Miss Lively that you had spoken to her deceased father? Let me shift gears real quick. Please ask the question again. Did you ever tell Miss Lively that you had spoken to her deceased father? No. And is your answer no, because in your view you told Miss Lively that you had prayed to her deceased father? Shapira, objection. Justin, no. I'm talking about the context of the conversation and the multiple conversations that happened regarding Miss Lively's unfortunately deceased father. Gottlieb, was there ever a point in time when you told Miss Lively that you had communicated in any form with her deceased father? I insinuated to Miss Lively in a conversation where the previous day we had spoken about life and death and various things, which we don't have to discuss now, that I had prayed for her dad and had asked him to bless our movie. Who else was there when you had that conversation with Miss Lively? This was at her, I don't know what you call it. She used to call it Buckingham Palace, as she said, because so many celebrities walk through there. I think that was her office in her penthouse apartment, which was the place that Miss Lively requested all of our meetings be. It was just her and myself. Is your testimony that Miss Lively used to refer to that as Buckingham Palace? That's what her and Mr. Reynolds would call it. Okay. They may have said it was something that Taylor Swift had said. And so your testimony is that at a meeting in the office in Miss Lively's apartment building, you shared with Miss Lively that you had prayed to her deceased father. Shapiro, objection. Justin, for and asked him to bless our movie. Gottlieb, is there any other time that you can recall that you mentioned to Miss Lively communicating in any way with her deceased father? Shapiro, objection. Justin, may I ask a clarifying question? Gottlieb, sure. What do you mean by communicating? I think it's more important that I understand what you mean by communicating. If communicating means a two-way conversation, is that what you're implying? That I'm suggesting to Miss Lively that I had a two-way conversation with her deceased father? I'm asking what you recollect saying to Miss Lively, and so I don't want us to get tripped up on talking to, communicating. What did you express to Miss Lively about whatever interactions or message or prayer? What did you express to Miss Lively about her deceased father anytime other than what you just told me? May I provide a little bit of context and then answer the question? I can't stop you. You could. Go ahead. I would give you consent. Go ahead, sir. The previous day in her office, as was customary, Miss Lively and I were having conversations about all sorts of things. She was an actor, and I'm a director, and I'm also an actor. And part of that is getting to know the person that you're acting with. This is something that all acting coaches and people, I believe, at a high level do. You get to know the person that you're working with. And I was made aware that Miss Lively's father had passed somewhat recently, I think within a few years. And I'd imagined that it might be difficult to be making a movie for the first time since his passings, since I learned he was like an acting coach. So I asked her if this was the first film that she's made since he's passed, and she said yes. And I think I said something about that. That must be hard. And what was he like? I've always found it in my years of experience being a human that oftentimes it's nice to discuss the memories of the people who have passed. And from what I heard, they were very close. So just in a way of having a conversation with Miss Lively to build a connection as we were working together fairly intimately. So she shared a little bit about her dad. I remember asking if she had any spiritual beliefs or so. And then I asked if it was okay if I shared mine. And so I shared a very brief summary of my faith, specifically because I said that we have some really beautiful beliefs about life after death. And so then I share that, I really believe that those of us, the people in our lives, our loved ones who pass on, are closer to us now than they were when they were here. I gave her the analogy of the womb and how in the Baha'i faith we are told that when we are infants in the womb, we have our whole world of existence. We are developing things. We're developing our eyes, our ears. We're developing our skin, our lungs. We're developing all of these things, but we don't have any use for them in the womb world. All the while, we are coexisting in this world. So basically, a baby is in both places at once. But we are aware of the baby in the womb, and we can pray for it, and we can influence it. And then I just explained that our belief is that when we die of the womb, we're born into this world. And we need everything that we were developing. But when we die in this world, we only take with us our spiritual qualities. But as it relates to her father, I was explaining that where we go next, which I believe you can call it heaven, or I believe you're Jewish, like most of my family, whatever you believe in or don't believe in. What I was explaining to her was that I believe that just like we could pray for the baby in the womb, I believe they can help us and pray for us, which is why all these little coincidences and miracles can happen. So based on that conversation, which I actually went back and told my wife that Miss Lively and I had a lovely conversation about life, she seemed very engaged, but also she's an actress, so maybe she wasn't. The next morning when I came in, because I had prayed for her father, I let her know that. And so it was in the context of this larger conversations, which I summarized shortly. It was much longer than that I offered a prayer for her father, and I asked him to bless our film because I believe that those who have passed on can still help us. I wasn't in any way saying that her and I and him and I had like a conversation and broed out, and that wasn't at all the context, nor do I think if you were a witness in the room, you would have felt that way. Shapiro, Mr. Gottlieb, can we take a short break? Gottlieb, after I'm done asking a follow-up question to that answer, which was approximately 6 minutes long. Justin, I'm sorry. I wasn't. Gottlieb, you gave me context. I told you you could. I was only following directions. I'm noting that it lasted 6 minutes. I'm not interested in this question. I'm not interested in what you intended to communicate. I'm interested in what you recall specifically saying, the words you specifically recall saying. And at any point in time that you can think of, did you say to Miss Lively that you had spoken to or had a conversation with her deceased father? Shapiro, objection. Justin, at no point in time have I ever spoken to Miss Lively and said that I had a conversation with her deceased father. Nor have I ever said to anyone that I've had a conversation with anyone who was deceased, as I was not born with the ability to speak to the dead. Gottlieb, okay, and I'm almost. Shapiro, can we please take a break? Gottlieb, I'm almost done. Shapiro, one more question and then we're taking a break. Gottlieb, do you recall ever saying to Miss Lively, after she referenced in a joke, tell my dad he owes me $40? Do you recall ever pulling $40 out of the coat of one of your pockets? Shapiro, objection. Gottlieb, out of the pockets of one of your coats. Shapiro, objection. Justin, so I remember a very funny coincidence, and I don't believe it was $40. I believe it was 20. So from my perspective, I remember that it was 20. And the reason I remember it was 20 was because on the way to her apartment, I found $20 on the road. And I remember it was 20 because I'm sure if you found $20, that's a very rare thing to find. So she made a joke, as Miss Lively often does, and so I made a joke back. And the conversation was no way I just found $20. It was two people joking. And it was never intended nor meant to be anything that was serious. But I did find $20. Gottlieb, I'm going to honor your counsel's request now. Shapiro, we're going to take a break. The videographer, we are going off the record. The time is 11:46 a.m. Recess. The videographer, we're back on the record. The time is 12:09 p.m.